When we looked at slipping and sliding events earlier in the course, we saw that when we did slip or slide an event along the timeline, the actual physical footprint length along our project's timeline remained the same. So, if we have a 6-second duration across the timeline of two connecting events, for example, if we slip or slide these events, then the resulting duration remained at its original dual event length. In other words, this length stayed static even though their timeline position moved. Now I know that sounds a little bit complex, so to reiterate, if a couple of adjacent events ranged over 6 seconds, for example, then when slipping or sliding, the event's range still lasted 6 seconds, even though the position moves on the timeline. Well, in this quick tutorial, looking at something called crossfade sliding, I'll look through how the same principle applies when we slide events that are crossfaded, i.e. the focus of our attention for the last couple of tutorials. Well, as you can see here, I've zoomed in really close on these two audio events, and I've already set up a crossfade between these two events, and you'll see there we have the audio crossfade in the middle, as we would expect. So now, if we focus more closely on these two events, we can see that the first event, event 1, has a start position on our timeline at 1 second. There it is there. Just looking across our timeline ruler, we notice the start position of event 1 is at 1 second. And then now, by shifting our attention to looking at the end of event 2, we see this ends at 8 seconds along the timeline. Therefore, simple maths tells us that the dual event length footprint of these two files, including the crossfade, is 7 seconds. 8 seconds less 1 second equals our combined length of 7 seconds. Now at present, we perhaps assume that the combined length of the two events is the same as it would be if we adjusted the crossfade. Well, when I slide the crossfade area, which I'll do in a moment, this is sort of what happens, and you'll see the dual event length remains at 7 seconds despite the crossfade moving. As I say, we'll see that in a moment, but first I'll show you the difference between simply creating a different crossfade area and how it differs to crossfade sliding. So with the second event here, I can easily left click on it, as we've seen a few times already, and then simply drag it to a new position. And then now note that the crossfade area position changes, and the combined footprint of the two events has altered too. However, in our example here, that's not really what I want, because I want our combined dual event footprint area with its 7 seconds duration to remain static, i.e. to remain at 7 seconds. Therefore, I'll just undo this by selecting the undo shortcut on my keyboard, i.e. I'll hit Ctrl plus Z on my keyboard to undo, to revert back to where we started a few moments ago. Therefore, if I now want to crossfade slide and keep the duration of the two events on the timeline to remain at their original length, I simply need to hold down Ctrl plus Alt and then left click on the crossfade area and subsequently drag it to a new position. And therefore, as you can now see, the crossfade area moves. But notice also the combined event footprint remains static at the 7 seconds that we were looking for. The actual beginning of event 1 remains where it was. The end of event 2 remains where that was. So we still have those 7 seconds stretching across our timeline. It's only the crossfade area that has moved. And of course I can do this in either direction. So, as you can see, the result is the crossfade area moves, not the combined footprint of the two events on the timeline. Okay, so very quick and easy, that's crossfade sliding.